Nalini-ji, you're a disciple of Swami Satyananda. Can you tell us a little bit about the life of Swami Satyananda?
Swami Satyananda always knew he wanted to be a sannyasin. And from an early age, he was extremely aware about the meditation practices, and he was born in the mountains in Almora. And then he decided to travel. He traveled a lot, and when he was, I think, about 20, he came to Swami Shivanand's ashram. And Swami Shivanand was very loving to him and to all his other disciples. And Swami Shivanand's, according to Swami Satyananda, Swami Shivanand's idea was that they must work. And they worked all the time. They were given all tasks and they were told that they cannot say no to any tasks. And also sometimes they would not have enough food to eat, because whatever food came into the ashram was given to the Swamis who were living on the ghats of the river. And Swami Satyananda says that often they would get so upset with the way things were. And then whenever one of them was upset, suddenly Swami Shivanand would be standing there and would say to them, "Why are you getting upset?" And then he says his thinking would change completely. One day he had been given a task of cleaning the deities in the ashram. So he was sitting on the banks of the Ganga and scrubbing the deities, and he was grumbling. And suddenly Swami Shivananda was standing behind him and said, "Do you know, you're talking to God." Because he was cleaning the deities and he was grumbling away. And so he told him, he said, "You are talking to God." Then Swami Satyananda said that, whenever I have to give a lecture or whenever I have to do something difficult, I think of Swami Shivanand's shoes. And I see those shoes on my head. And I always think of that and think of Swamiji's humility. Because for many of us, shoes are considered unclean. And Swami Shivananda, of course, was wearing khadaus, wooden shoes. And now we all pray to those very shoes of Swami Shivananda. But I remember that when he said it, I thought of big leather slippers, but it was wooden. And it's also, Swami Satyananda said that I always think of myself as his disciple, and he's always in my mind. Swami Shivananda showed a lot of concern for all his disciples. And when Swami Shivananda was doing night duty as a watchman in a children's Sanskrit school, Swami Shivananda would send coffee for him because he knew he liked coffee. And also, Swami Satyananda said he knew that some of the sannyasins smoked, and he didn't say anything. After a while, they all gave up smoking because there was no pleasure in it, and also the fact that their guru and master knew. So Swami Shivananda gave them a great deal of freedom. And Swamiji says it was one of the most beautiful periods of his life, spending time there. And Swamiji had made a vow that after 20 years, he would give up the ashram in Munger. And this is exactly what he did. In 1984, he decided he would leave Munger. He made Swami Niranjan the head, and he moved to Rikhia and started worshipping the mother goddess there and taking care of the villagers.
Nalini, maybe you can let us a little bit know more about how he came from Shivananda Ashram to the Bihar School of Yoga.
He was, Swami Satyananda was traveling a great deal after he left the ashram. This is, one day Swami Shivananda asked him, "Did you dream?" And he said, "Yes, I dreamt last night. And in that dream, I stopped my dream. I came out of the dream. And then I went back again into the dream. And the dream was that he was sitting on the banks of the Ganga, and it was a starry night and the moon was out. And then he decided to make it into a dark night. In the dream, it became a dark night. Then he came out of the dream, and then he went back and said, "Let me see the sunrise." And he saw the sunrise. The next day, Swami Shivananda asked him this question. And then Swami Shivananda told him, "You are now ready for meditation." So then, after that, he started the meditation practices, and he was very keen to leave the ashram. At one stage, he even got a job as a journalist. And Swamiji came to him, Swami Shivananda, and said, "You want to leave? You may go." Then, the next morning, Swami Satyananda decided he wasn't going. Finally, the day came, and Swami Shivananda told him, "You're ready to go." And he told him in his ears about Kriya Yoga, about Kundalini Yoga. He whispered in his ears for about 10 minutes. And then Swami Satyananda started traveling. He traveled all over. He had many disciples who would say, "Swamiji, stay with us, stay with us." And he didn't do that. Then when Swami Shivananda died, Swamiji was in Munger, and Swami Shivananda had told everybody, all his disciples, that when I leave my body, wherever I am, you will start an ashram there. And that's how Swami Satyananda started the ashram in Munger, which is a difficult place to reach. And he started the ashram there.
And then he stayed there for
20
years, and then
Yes.
he handed it over to Swami Niranjananda.
Because he made this promise that he would leave in 20 years.
You know a little bit about his final years, huh?
His final years, he didn't travel. He stayed in Rikhia. And what he started doing was that he did very intensive pujas, and he would go for walks. Now when he went for walks, people would come. So first he started his walk at 4 o'clock, then at 3 o'clock, then at 2 o'clock. Because by the time he would start, hundreds of people were going with him. And it wasn't a walk. And then in Rikhia itself, Rikhia is a very small town. And Devgarh, it's next to Devgarh. Devgarh is the place where there is a Shivling. And this Shivling is the Shivling which is believed was carried by Ravana. After he had been granted immortality. So what was important was that Ravana should not be allowed to carry the Shivling. So the Shivling fell in Devgarh, and Ravana went on to Sri Lanka. And Rikhia is the place where it is believed that the eyes of Sati fell. So it is a place which has very strong spiritual significance. And so he decided, Swami Satyananda, that he would educate the girls in the village and teach them Sanskrit, the Kanyas they are called, and teach them the chanting of Saundarya Lahari, Lalita Sahasranama. And these are girls taken from the ages of 7 to 12. And what has happened in Rikhia is that all the girls are driving bicycles, they have computers, they are going to college, and more children are getting educated there.
So Swami Satyananda went into social work and helped a lot.
Social reform there.
And what about his final days?
His final days, he kept very good health, extremely good health, and he started performing the Durga Saptashati, and a lot of pujas are done in Rikhia throughout the year, and he would come out for the pujas.
Thank you very much for these insights.